Good evening, and we call to order our latest meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for this August 26th. We begin, as always, with our agenda. I would like to know if there are any changes to our agenda. If not, a motion to adopt the agenda next in order.
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
How about a second? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The agenda has been adopted. We are now moving on to the approval of our regular meeting minutes from our July 22nd meeting. Once again, if you have any changes, please let me know right away. Otherwise, a motion to approve those minutes is next.
Make a motion we approve.
Second, please.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. We are also through with the approval of the minutes. We are now moving on to our very first case of the evening in near record time. And our first case is 18 REZ 30 Twyla Road.
Good evening, Board. This is a request to rezone 36.94 acres. This is at the intersection of Morrisville Parkway and NC540. The site is along the northern side of Morrisville Parkway, and it sits at a future interchange at 540. It's next to the Friars Gate subdivision. Twyla Road was originally built in the 1980s with detached dwellings. Lot sizes are between 2 to 5 acres. The interchange of 540 is currently under construction, and it'll be open later this year. And once open, the site will be the only interchange between Green Level West Road to the north and Highway 55, Green Level West Road to the south, excuse me, and Highway 55 to the north. The current zoning on the property is R40, and the applicant is requesting to Plan Development District Major. The Plan Development District has several tracts. First is the RMF tract, which would allow up to 395 multifamily units. There's the C1 tract, which would allow between 10 to 40,000 square feet of commercial uses, with the ability to trade out hotel rooms as the commercial square footage increases. There are 2 open space tracts, which are approximately 12 acres combined. Allowed uses within the C1 tract are those that are allowed within the general commercial zoning district. The uses listed on this slide represent many of the uses that would be allowed in the general commercial district. The applicant has proposed to exclude certain uses. The remaining uses that are allowed would include indoor kennel, bank, restaurant, office, hotel, retail and personal service establishments, vehicle filling station, just to name a few. The applicant has also committed to traffic calming along Stockwell Lane, which is this road to the east of the site connecting to Highcroft Drive. They proposed curb and gutter on all internal streets. Within the development, they propose phasing of the residential and non-residential uses to ensure a mix of uses will be built. The site is impacted by stream buffers, and as you can see, they impact the eastern property boundary. Stream buffers also run along Twyla Road and along the northern property boundary. When evaluating the rezoning request, staff looks to the guidance of the Imagine Cary Community Plan. First, we note the site is within a commercial center on the Future Growth Framework map. Commercial uses are the predominant use within a commercial center. Multifamily is listed. With this particular commercial center, we have the opportunity to view how the entire center may develop. There are active development projects submitted in all 3 sections of the commercial center. Plus, there's the construction of the new interchange at 540. The interchange will include a roundabout. You can see the subject property will gain access to the roundabout that's being built as part of the interchange project. This is a copy of the plans from NCDOT showing how the interchange will be built. You can also see that once the right-of-way associated with the interchange project is removed, this will impact the look and feel of the commercial center. It will narrow the southern side. The active development projects that I mentioned before include an approved development plan for a shopping center on the west side of 540. This is called the Lowe's at Greystone development, with 70,000 square feet of shopping center area anchored by a grocery store. Along the eastern side of 540, there's 2 active rezoning requests, Twyla North and Twyla South. The applicant for Twyla South is different than the applicant for Twyla North, and you'll be seeing Twyla South probably in a few months. It's still preparing for its initial town council public hearing. To ensure a mix of uses on the Twyla North site, the applicant is proposing a phasing condition which will require a minimum amount of non-residential building to be constructed before the second half of the multifamily units are started. Staff is also at this site in relationship to other nearby commercial uses. On this map, commercial uses are shown in red, office in purple, and non-residential uses in pink. This map shows the subject site and its proximity to nearby commercial, office, and non-residential uses within 1 mile and 2 mile radiuses. The Imagine Cary Community Plan provides guidance for location and also the distribution of commercial centers across the town with the intent of accommodating daily shopping and service needs within a half mile to a mile of most households. Moving on from the analysis of the commercial center found in the Shape chapter, we next looked at the Live chapter of the Imagine Cary plan. The plan states that housing should accommodate a diverse mix of households, and further, that there should be a mix of housing options in developing parts of town. The housing mix within a 2 mile radius of the site finds that 63% of the housing is detached dwellings, with 21% townhouses and 16% multifamily. The traffic study evaluated 12 intersections within the of the site. The applicant has committed to 2 intersection improvements, a westbound right turn lane on Morrisville Parkway at the side entrance, and a second eastbound left turn lane at Morrisville Parkway and NC 55. The applicant has also committed to the installation of traffic calming measures on Stockwell Lane. Stockwell Lane is this road located to the east of the site, which connects to Highcroft Drive, and there are 2 residential lots off Stockwell Lane, so the traffic calming will assist with the flow of traffic in between the site traveling to Highcroft Drive. A neighborhood meeting for this property was held on January 9th with 17 attendees present. Questions and concerns raised by nearby residents were regarding the traffic, the proposed commercial uses, and the height of the non-residential uses. This case had 2 public hearings. First was a public hearing in May, and at the public hearing, the applicant proposed to increase the amount of commercial square footage. And the ordinance for the town of Cary states that when a PDD is proposed, if there's an increase in intensity after the public hearing's been advertised, it needs to go back to an initial public hearing. So because of this change, the case went back to an initial public hearing before the council in July. And since the public hearings, new conditions have been offered. The applicant has proposed curb and gutter on all internal streets. They proposed an increase in the non-residential square footage. They proposed phasing, again, to ensure a mix of non-residential and residential uses. And they proposed the traffic calming along Stockwell Lane. This is a case where there are policies in the plan that are found to be supportive of this rezoning. There are other policies that may be supportive depending on the context for how the site is viewed. Staff finds that the addition of the multifamily housing at this location is consistent with the Live chapter. When we look at the Shape chapter, the project on its own has more residential uses than non-residential uses, so it may struggle to comply with the commercial center designation. However, when we step back and we look at the commercial center in its entirety, framing Highway 540, and the other uses that are proposed at the other developments, the proposed mix of uses may be appropriate across the entirety of this commercial center. Lastly, we find that the stream buffers create a wide natural transition between the residential properties to the east and to the north. The applicant has also offered a condition for traffic calming along Stockwell Lane, which will help with the transportation transition on Stockwell Lane to Highcroft Drive. So along the lines of staff considerations, the staff has provided a few questions that the board may wish to consider, among others. So one of the questions would be, are the uses that are proposed appropriate for the commercial center designation? Then we also ask, is it possible for the construction of the Lowe's at Greystone Shopping Center, as well as the Twyla South rezoning, when it's looked at them in their entirety, could they satisfy the requirement of the commercial center designation as a whole? So this concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here to share comments. Following that, staff will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Ed Tang with Withers Ravenel. I'm here on behalf of the applicant GCI. As you can tell, I'm not Glenda's top tonight. She's taken some well-deserved time off, so I'm here pinch hitting for her. The role of the Planning and Zoning Board is to review the request to determine if it is consistent with the imagined Cary community plan. My presentation will show how the proposed rezoning complies with the Cary community plan and its policies. The subject property is designated as a commercial center on the future growth framework map, as discussed. When looking at the subject property from a town-wide comprehensive planning perspective, the Twyla Road North site is a good candidate for the commercial center designation, for which it is currently identified on the map. From a bird's eye view and sound planning principles, its location in the northeast quadrant of the Morsel Parkway and 540 interchange makes sense for such a designation. However, no two commercial center designations on the map are alike. Each commercial center must be evaluated based on its own unique set of circumstances. At the site-specific and ground level, there are some significant constraints affecting this site that indicate that a more typical commercial center is not such a good fit for this site. If any of you have been out there and have seen the roundabout that DOT is in the process of building at the interchange, there's some significant grade difference between the top of that roundabout and the northern terminus, the northern property line. It's approximately 65 feet of fall from that roundabout down into the site. So rather significant for a commercial center to be designated. In addition to topography, site visibility is limited. Natural drainage and circulation issues make it an atypical commercial center. The mix of uses that we're proposing for the project is appropriate for this portion of the commercial center. The configuration of the uses is dictated by the topography, the drainage ways found within the site. And fortunately, with working with DOT, we were able to obtain access off of the roundabout, as Ms. Dry mentioned, thus making the project suitable for our use as a commercial center. This is in large part due to the ratio of the mix of uses that is being proposed. The proposed rezoning was modified in order to comply with the commercial center designation. The number of multifamily units was reduced from 420 to 395. The minimum amount of commercial retail square footage starts at 10,000 square feet, and a maximum square footage was added of 40,000 square feet for the commercial retail square footage. This square footage is in addition to the hotel square footage that is being proposed. The size of the hotel will be dependent on the amount of commercial square footage being offered. These changes were made to bring the site further into conformance with the Cary community plan. A condition addressing phasing was also added. This condition is critical to ensure that a portion of the non-residential development will be built before the completion of the multifamily units. The condition reads as follows: if the NC 540 interchange / Morsel Parkway overpass are operational and open to the public, the property owner of the developer shall not request building permits for more than 250 residential units until such time as certificates of compliance are issued for a minimum of 5,000 square feet of non-residential building in the overall development. In determining whether or not a rezoning complies with the Cary community plan, one must look at the total of the non-residential parcels around this interchange, and not just our site. Here's what the other approved or proposed quadrants around the interchange are planned or have committed to. Starting with our site, as I mentioned, the minimum is 10,000 square feet of commercial up to 40,000 square feet. These square footages are in addition to the hotel. If the commercial square footage starts at 10,000, the size of the hotel is approximately 105,000 square feet. If the commercial square footage goes up to 40,000, then the hotel size drops to about 75,000. So if you look at those numbers, that all adds up to about 115,000 square feet of commercial square footage on our quadrant. As Ms. Dry mentioned, the northwest quadrant of the interchange has an approved shopping center for 70,000 square feet, anchored by a low food grocery store. On the south side of Twyla Road, a rezoning has been submitted that you all have not seen, committing to 29,000 square feet. It will come before you, as she said, soon. At the intersection of Mooresville Parkway and Highcroft Drive, although not part of the commercial center designation, the Fryer PDD back in 2006 committed to 22,000 square feet of commercial adjacent to this site. While not part of it, it adds to the overall commercial designation, in my opinion. We believe that our site meets the definition of a commercial center, both in size and the amount of square footage being proposed. However, in defining a commercial center, one has to look at the total of all the non-residential parcels surrounding that interchange. If you do the math and add up all the numbers I went through, that equals about 236,000 square feet of commercial development, either approved or in planning around this interchange. In our opinion, the commercial center designation at this location has been achieved. Staff posed two questions in their presentation. Are the uses appropriate for the commercial center designation, being one of them? Question number two is, does the possible construction of the Lowe's at Greystone Shopping Center in the Twyla South satisfy the commercial uses designation for this commercial center designation? And we believe the answer to these questions is yes. I'm going to touch briefly on the policies that Ms. Dry mentioned already in the Cary Community Plan, and to identify how we meet them. The proposed rezoning complies with the following policies. The Chapter 2 is the Live chapter. We believe that our project complies with the Live chapter policies 2 and 3 by providing more housing choices and more housing options. The proposal meets these objectives by providing housing options for Cary's diverse mix of residents and providing a new housing option in an area that is predominantly single family, as you saw. Chapter 3, the Work chapter, we believe that our project complies with the Work chapter policy 1 and 6 by providing employment opportunities in the retail and hospitality services area. The retail and the support services will enhance the ability for small businesses to be located here and also provide employment opportunities. The hotel will provide much needed hospitality services near the USA baseball facility, which is not far from here. Chapter 4 is the Shop chapter. We believe that our proposal meets the Shop chapter policy 2 by providing a wide range of neighborhood level retail to surrounding neighborhoods within a half mile to a mile of the site. Chapter 5, Engage. We believe that our project will provide engagement opportunities to residents and users by providing an extensive open space and internal greenway system to connect other uses and infrastructure. There are community gathering spaces throughout the project and a private amenity for the residents. Chapter 6 is the Shape chapter. The location of the site at the interchange of Mooresville Parkway and 540 meets the location criteria for a commercial center. Commercial centers should incorporate a mix of uses to make it convenient for residents and shoppers. Commercial centers should have obviously commercial uses, but the Cary Community Plan also recognizes that residential uses may be inappropriately mixed in use. This commercial center location is affected by the physical characteristics of the site due to topography, drainage ways, visibility issues as discussed. We believe that the overall commercial center for the interchange, when you look at the entire interchange with what is planned. Given this, the nature, scale, and intensity of the commercial center is appropriate for this location. Chapter 7 is the Move chapter. I believe that we meet the Move chapter by providing infrastructure to support our project's impact to the surrounding transportation network. In conclusion, it is our opinion that the proposed PDD meets the policies of the Cary Community Plan as outlined. Since the initial public hearing, much work has been done to address concerns raised by neighbors and staff. A concern was raised at the council public hearing concerning curb and gutter. We heard the council's concerns and added a condition that all streets will have curb and gutter. The applicant also heard concerns voiced by neighboring property owners who live on Stockwell Lane. The applicant has met with the neighbors, and a zoning condition was added stating that the property owner or the developer shall install traffic calming devices such as medians, curb extensions, or other devices that are acceptable to the town along Stockwell Lane within 500 feet of the closest residential lot prior to the first CO in a non-residential building. Appropriate and effective comprehensive planning begins at a town-wide level, including developing goals, objectives, and policies to support and implement a plan. Translating a community-wide plan with land use designations such as commercial center requires respect for the plan's intent and policies, but also requires recognition of site-specific conditions and constraints, as well as the evolution of the land uses in the area surrounding the site as a whole. Given the physical constraints of the property, along with the combination of proposed and approved commercial retail uses, it is our professional opinion that the size, scale, and percentage breakdown of the non-residential and residential uses being proposed complies with the Cary Community Plan. The plan uses are both consistent with the commercial center designation, viewed that the entire interchange is part of the commercial center and permits sensitive treatment of the site constraints and limitations while furthering the goals of the Cary Community Plan. That concludes my remarks. We have with us tonight representatives of the developer, GCI. We have our site engineer, our traffic engineer, and the residents that own the property. So if there are any questions, we'd be glad to entertain them when the time comes. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Got a spot right there for you if you like. And we'll begin with any questions that any of our members might have of the staff or of the applicant. I'll start on this side of the room.
Just a quick question. Usually in the presentation, I see where it says neighborhood meeting was in January 9th. And the questions and concerns during that meeting, usually we have something in here about the public hearings, about if any of the people in the neighborhood had spoken and what concerns they still had. But I don't see it in here. Did you read that, or did you say that out loud? I'm sorry if I missed it.
I did not say that out loud. It is in the staff report, though. At the first public hearing, we heard from some residents who lived along Stockwell Lane and in the neighborhood directly to the east, and they were concerned about, traffic impacts and also some of the impacts from commercial development. We also heard from a number of the property owners along Twyla Road, and the concerns that they've had about trying to move on from their properties with the construction of 540 and the impact that that's had on their properties, and they've worked together to sell their properties as a whole. So they were very interested in being able to move forward with this case.
Thank you. I think that's it right now.
Keep right on moving.
All right. A couple of questions. One is, I was looking, the 12.4 acres that are going to be left as open space, is that a condition?
Yes, the open space is shown on the PDD document as particular tracks. So you can see one of the open space tracks here is OS2, and then there's a second tract called OS1. So there's two tracks. Together, they're approximately 12 acres.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Tang mentioned that the combination of the hotel and the commercial office space could be as much as 115,000 square feet. Would staff concur with that, or?
That could be the case very well. When we look at hotel uses and the traffic impacts, we look at the number of rooms or beds associated with the hotel. So we look at how many rooms or beds would be associated with it rather than the square footage, and that's for the traffic analysis portion. But it could very well end up being that number. Okay, be about that.
I had a question on the applicant's proposing up to 395 units of multifamily on approximately 20 acres, and is that, to me, that strikes me as being fairly dense. Is that I think about we've had other applications before where as folks come through zoning, we looked at more like 12 units per acre or something like that. But I'm not an expert in this area, so I'm just wondering from where the staff is seeing other multifamily projects coming forward. Is that a fairly dense project, or are we looking at going more than above the typical 3-story?
So the density that would be created with the 395 multifamily units would be around 19.6 units per acre. You mentioned our RMF district, that's our residential multifamily district. That allows up to 12 units per acre. When an applicant proposes a planned development district or the mixed-use district, they can set their own density standards. So We have been seeing requests through PDDs and through MXDs to ask for higher densities than what the RMF district allows for. So that is something that we are seeing more. I don't know if I can speak to specifically how much higher this would be than what we typically see.
But it is typical what you're beginning to see coming across and from the planning department in terms of proposed developments within a like a PPD like this. And
we are, with PDDs and MXDs, we are typically seeing higher.
I don't have any other questions right now.
It's to you, Steve.
A couple of questions. First of all, the roundabout, is that dictated by the town? Is it developer? How did that? Just seems there's going to be a lot of traffic through there with that roundabout.
I believe the roundabout is associated with NCDOT project that the town is participating in. And if you have further questions, I have a representative from the Transportation Facilities Department who could probably get into the specifics of, the operations of that.
It was more of, is this a forever thing? Is it a temporary thing? Is it?
I don't believe it's going to be a long-term option here. It could very well be a stoplight at some point in the future. But we don't know that for certain. I'd like to see if Priyatham Khanda could talk a little bit further about the timing.
Hi, good evening. The size of the roundabout and the number of lanes going through a roundabout is only to take care of traffic in the next decade to 15 years or so. And the bridge on 540 is a single lane bridge, and that's what dictated the size of the roundabout. In the future, it could replace. It could be replaced by a traffic signal or maybe a 2-lane roundabout.
Okay, I mean it makes sense. I just figured there could be a lot of vehicles coming off eventually. I mean it's going to be a gateway area.
That is true. Right now there is no traffic, so the 1 lane should be enough for current day's traffic. So.
Okay, thank you. I had another question. The little parcel there that's owned by the town. What is that? Is that a park? Is that a what is that?
This parcel is owned by the town. Was originally purchased several years ago by the town when the applicant offered to sell it to the town with anticipation for a need for potential future right-of-way. I believe at that point the actual location for the interchange was not established yet. So it's still owned by the town, and there are it will be associated with some of the construction work that's happening with the interchange construction. And once that's completed later this year, then then the town will decide if they potentially need the property anymore.
Okay, last question. Over the last 8 years, have there been a lot of development coming forth? It just hasn't ever materialized. I just couldn't see if there was things in the past that, I know this has been kind of sitting for a while.
For this particular site?
Yeah, for the North Pit.
I don't know the history of the site off the top of my head.
But through the planning department, this is the first.
Deborah Grannon can help to speak to a little bit more of the history.
We have not seen any development proposals. They've been waiting for the road to come in. So the land use plan was approved several years ago, and then the Cary community plan was approved. And so this is what we're seeing now, is the first time we're seeing a lot of interest in development in this area.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
That's it.
Martha, can I have another question?
Oh, sorry. Not so fast.
So I'm Tucker McKenzie with Withers Ravenel. I'm the site engineer on the project. I did want to speak a little bit to the history, although no formal plans or applications have been submitted to the town. We've had 3 reputable commercial developers look at the site with Withers Ravenel specifically, and the types of development was solely commercial in nature, and they're because of a lot of the constraints on the site, never moved forward to a formal application because they couldn't quite get there.
Okay, thanks.
Is that it? Fine.
Did you want to?
Yeah, just real quick, if you don't mind. And I don't know if anybody has a crystal ball out there, but does the town of Cary foresee this being another destination center possibly with the proximity to 540?
This site is not designated as a destination center, so the interchanges to the north and to the south are destination centers. This site is designated for the commercial center designation. So what that means is you would see smaller scale commercial development, potentially mixed with some uses that would be potentially office or residential multifamily, but not destination center, more of a neighborhood commercial type development.
Okay, I was just trying to differentiate the destination center that we just saw a couple months ago at Green Level West compared to what this is. So
yeah, it was never envisioned that this commercial center would be developed with the intensity that we're seeing in some of the destination centers at the other interchanges. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Brian.
No, that's fine. Good evening, Mr. Dry. I have a couple questions regarding the wording, some of the zoning conditions. The first one is the zoning condition 5 that was added. It references a minimum of 5,000 square feet of non-residential buildings. Would that include the hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it could.
And then secondly, the last zoning condition regarding the traffic calming measures. Can you maybe elaborate a little about the process, what exactly that will entail? Just thinking about that as a property owner in that area, it seems it's very vague as to what that actually means or what that actually will be. Is there any more context you provide there?
I'd love to ask Pritham Kondo with Transportation Facilities, because he would be working with the applicant at the development plan process to be able to work through that. So hopefully you can provide some more context.
Great.
Hi, good evening again. So when the applicant comes in for a pre-application meeting for the development plan, we're going to be asking for concepts of traffic calming that they would propose there, and we're going to discuss to see what is the most effective in terms of calming the traffic, and that will result in the least amount of impact to the two residences that are there. We'll probably pick that traffic calming measure. It could be one or a combination of one or two.
And that decision is predominantly driven by the town?
Yes, in this case, it would be town with the decision makers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I got.
I have a question for the applicant. You alluded in your statement that the some 60 feet of fall seems to be, and I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, seems to be one of the main drivers prohibiting commercial development. The Withers and Ravenel representative said there were constraints that prevented the commercial development. I see in the notes from the neighborhood meeting that there was a discussion at that time, none of us I think were part of that, that mentioned how the topography prohibits it. While it's not common, I have seen commercial shopping centers and other commercial entities around that have a considerable amount of fall, but granted it's fall and then it's a big flat spot, so it's not rolling. But can you elaborate a little more on why we can't do a commercial development here because of the terrain?
I think if you look at the terrain out there, the roundabout, if any of you have been out there, sits up extremely high, and you have to look down into the site. So any kind of commercial development, as Mr. McKenzie alluded to, we've had several people look at this site. A commercial center generally wants to be flat. You have to be visible for it to really take off and be successful. If the site drops off that dramatically, if you build any buildings there all the way through the site to make them all commercial, the people at the northern end are going to be very difficult to be able to see. Plus, you've also got to meet ADA requirements to get people in and out of the site. In addition, with the topography, if we were to build the site and fill it and bring walls in, we would basically have to, impact the environmental features, the natural topography, not the natural, the trees and all the streams back there would be impacted, because now we basically build a wall up around the site. So in context, we're trying to be sensitive to the existing features that are out there. If we man-made put walls out there, it would have a very negative impact, in our opinion, to the natural environment out there. So trying to maintain some of that would be extremely difficult in this case to make it a 100% commercial, and that's why some of the 2 or 3 commercial developers that have looked at it, they couldn't make a go of it because of those reasons and obviously the cost. So.
Thank you. That's the only question I had.
Yeah, I wanted to ask staff to address the traffic study and the things that the applicant is agreeing to do. It seems like we always see a long list of things on traffic studies, and almost always the applicants only agree to do a few of them. And I just want to find out if staff is satisfied with what they've agreed to do.
I'm going to ask Priyatham Kanda to speak to that question, but to help with that, I pulled up the traffic study slide.
Hi, I'll answer your last question. We're never satisfied with the amount of improvements we get. We always strive to get as much as possible, but again, we have to remember that it's the applicant is voluntarily offering these improvements. We do not have the authority to ask them to make all these improvements. So, having said that, the improvement at 55 on Morsel Parkway is going to be a substantial improvement. It is a 400-foot second left turn lane that will also have signal modification. So we did consider substantial. Yeah, there are a few other improvements that would have been nice to have, but in this case, we took the best one we could get.
What about the traffic signals? That seemed to be something where there was no meeting of the mind.
I can speak a little bit to the traffic signal at Highcroft and McCrimmon Parkway, which is closest to their site. The signal warrants may not be met in the immediate future, but there's a good chance by the time Twyla South comes along, and by the time the commercial to the northwest corner of the interchange comes along, there might be enough traffic for it to meet warrants. And we're hoping to see some improvement commitments from Twyla South also. And I can ask the developer's engineer to speak a little bit if he has any additional information on that.
Good evening, Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn Associates here on behalf of the applicant. Can we get back to the overall site slide? So, as we've discussed, we do have access to the roundabout, and we anticipate that most of the traffic will be coming out onto the roundabout instead of via Highcroft Drive. It's kind of a chicken or the egg question. If the signal is there, people will use it. But if the signal is not there, why would you go try to make an unprotected left turn where you may have to wait several minutes? Whereas you could just go out the roundabout, and that main access drive will lead right to the roundabout and be the main ingress and egress for the site. So that's why we don't expect to add a lot of turns on and off of Highcroft, and why we didn't offer to do the signal.
Okay, but the roundabouts, it's anticipated that that's going to be signalized at some point in the future, isn't that correct?
The roundabout itself will not be signalized. There's a chance the roundabout could be replaced with a traffic signal. Yes.
Okay.
Is that it?
I'm still confused about this roundabout situation. Can we see the slide that shows that?
Is this the slide?
Yeah. Okay, great. So you're saying that's a temporary, well, temporary in
like 10 years.
10-year decade terms.
Yeah, in the short term, this section of Morrisville Parkway is going to be 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction. And the town and DOT in coordination when working out the plans for this determined that a roundabout would be a good alternative for that temporary condition. However, in the future, when Morrisville Parkway is widened to 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, I think this will be reevaluated, and that's when a signal could likely be installed.
So the footprint that's being taken up by this roundabout that has to be provided for, how does that, I'm still struggling with your comments earlier, Mr. Tan, about how the steep grade and why it's not appropriate for commercial use. So what are you putting there instead if these other commercial uses are also proposed?
So, and maybe I need your clarification. So the roundabout now is approximately constructed at elevation 347, 350. That's the grade of the roundabout today.
What does that mean?
Think of it as a height elevation of that roundabout. That's the ground elevation.
Okay.
If you were to drive north on that roundabout into the Twyla community, that land drops off almost immediately behind that roundabout today. There's a huge bank of dirt that's there now, and as you keep going to the north, that elevation of the existing ground at the end of Twyla Road is about elevation 284. That's a pretty significant drop in a very short distance, and really, you know, at the roundabout, it is extremely tall because they had to basically build that up in order to get over NC 540. So if you've been out there, that bridge that DOT built when 540 was constructed was elevated over the highway. So as Morrisville Parkway approaches in both ends, they basically had to pull the grade up to meet that bridge elevation, changing the elevation of the existing ground that was below it. So it's a rather significant change that impacts, in our opinion, the what is appropriately to be used out here. If you were to build a large shopping center, navigating that grade change would be rather significant. We could do it with walls, as I mentioned, but it would change greatly the natural drainage ways and the environmental features around the site.
I can appreciate that. So are you saying that nothing else can go in there except for that roundabout in that section? Obviously, if you're describing
Well, the roundabout is being built now. Mm-hmm. We're not building it. It is being built by the DOT today. So okay. I'm describing an existing condition that's there today, and it's not anything we're building.
So I'm trying to figure out what's going to go in there besides the road.
Oh, Katie, do you mind going back to the PDD to see that shows the land uses? So we are proposing some commercial, that C1, that red area, in that immediate area up against Morrisville Parkway, where it would want to belong because you can see it from the road. Mm. But taking it further back, if you were to make all of that commercial, it makes it extremely difficult to get the grade to work all the way to the north. But we can make that front portion work, even though there's a steep grade drop, but it's more significant the further north you move.
So does the kind of work within that undulating sort of landscape?
It has more flexibility.
I see. Okay.
If you were to build a grocery store in a big box, there's only so much you can do.
So that's the differentiation of the different types of occupancy. I understand. Thank you for that explanation.
I have a question for the applicant. Could we go back to the slide that has the mix of residential uses? 63% of the single-family homes. Thank you. So if I'm looking at this, I mean, I'm assuming that most people that would be moving there are families. And considering that there's a school across the street, I was just wondering if there was any study that was done on the impact to the school with a lot of these new families moving in.
I don't believe a study was done to address that particular question. I don't know that one has ever been done, to my knowledge, for answering that question. I know that the multifamily will consist of some families. Usually they're singles or people with smaller households, so there may not be such a large impact. Generally speaking, that's usually what we find in multifamily, is that we either have single young professionals without kids, you have a small percentage with kids. So I don't believe that the impact to the school system will be significant based on the type of resident that it's attracting.
I would agree with that if the multifamily and even the townhouses had a larger percentage of that pie. I think the detached dwellings would most likely be families moving in there. Okay. Right. I have young children, and so
yeah, the detached dwellings are, and Katie, that's the existing percentage of households in that general area.
This is existing.
Yes, this is the existing.
Right, yeah, so what staff did was we looked at the housing mix within a 2-mile radius of the site to understand what's currently in the neighborhood where this is going. And we found that within 2 miles of the site, 63% of the houses are, or of the dwellings are single-family houses. And then we found that, a portion of that was also multifamily and townhomes. So we were looking at, how is this proposal fitting into that larger mix of housing within that general area?
Okay. Is there a future state chart as well that shows how these percentages change?
Yeah, so if this project were approved, the multifamily would go up from, it's currently at 16%, it would go up to around 18%. If you were to add in this additional, 395 multifamily units. So it would change the chart slightly.
Okay. Nicole, were you asking about like the schools like Mills Park and Highcroft? Mm-hmm. So right now I live in that area and those 2 particular schools are capped. Mm-hmm. However, they are building a couple more elementary schools in that area. So it should help alleviate any effect that it would have.
Okay, good. That's what I was wondering, if that would happen. Okay.
They've built 2 in the last 5 years to add on to what's already there.
Okay.
I'll also add that Wake County Public Schools does routinely reach out to the town of Cary staff, and we share development data with them, as well as development that's in the pipeline, so they can understand what's built and what may be coming in the future, so that can help them plan as well.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. That's good to hear. Okay. That was all my questions.
Mine have been answered already.
I have one follow-up just based on something I'd heard. Is it, were you representing before that the elevation changes are due to the road having been built up to accommodate the bridge, and it's, for lack of a better term, and it's an artificial terrain situation, that the fall is primarily due to Morrisville Parkway Road being artificial, being built up, man-made, anthropogenically built up to have the meetup with the bridge, and that's creating the terrain. That naturally the terrain was not this 60-foot or some large measure. I believe you said 350 to 284. Is that? I just need a clarification. That's all. It's not a big deal.
So, not totally. There is a part, the interchange itself plays a part of that, but just naturally, the site naturally falls that much to the north. So it's not totally artificial. Where the roundabout itself is built up, but the adjoining areas are relatively level, so it's the natural. Okay,
great. Thank you. That's all. Anyone else with any other follow-ups? So if there's no other follow-ups for the staff or the applicant, and thank you very much for answering all those questions for us, would anyone like to make a motion so we can kick around the discussion part of this case?
I'll make a motion, just so we can have that exercise. I'll move that the board find case number 18 REZ 30 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Start us off, Dan.
You know, one of the staff asked the question of, as we look at these commercial centers, looking at them as a whole instead of each parcel, and so this is a little bit easier because there's 3 pieces, and at least one piece is known. We have a 70,000 square foot shopping center anchored by a supermarket, so we know what's going on one corner, and then begin seeing them coming together. So I think when you look at the total, that does help. Recognizing also the topography that, and we've seen this in some other cases where it's not we look at it as one-dimensional map, and it's not that way. It's 3-dimensional. You have topography. It limits what can be done. Retaining walls, as you were describing, are expensive, and they also does change a lot of the dynamics of the land itself, where on the backside there's a lot of things to do with multifamily, et cetera, that you don't have. So I see a piece there, that comes together. kudos to the applicant for offering the 400 feet of left lane turn on the left, on the east. All I can say, if that goes through, if your application is successful, there's a whole bunch of other developers who are going to thank you because that's been a stumbling block at that intersection. But I just see it in terms of a piece, and I can see, I like the trade-off in terms of the hotel versus commercial. That's as much about the market as it is anything else. If the commercial takes off, then great, then you know you don't have to be anchored by the hotel. So I see that dynamic, and you know, I think they've done a reasonable job of trying to address the concerns about the neighbors in terms of traffic calming, the curb and gutter, which is certainly was an issue concerned by many. So for that, I think we should move forward positive.
Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, I struggle with this a bit because of the master plan, and just on paper, before you look at it too closely, it looked like, well, maybe it all ought to be commercial, but the topography items are what turned me around on it with the stream buffers and the drop off of the land. And I was reminded of criticism of some shopping centers in Cary that have steep declines that have had problems from time to time because of visibility issues. So it's a legitimate concern when you're doing a commercial project. So then I got turned around on it the more I looked at it.
Any other things to offer up in discussion? I'll work on it. Nicole?
Sure. I agree. I think it's a good use of this space. I think it's not up to me, but I would prefer the commercial over the hotel, particularly since the school is right there. But I think it's consistent.
I think so too. Looking at that kind of a patchwork of the spaces, the way it's allocated, obviously they have to be sensitive to getting those to fit with what the land itself allows, and I think it's probably been a bit of a juggle to do that, plus accommodate the road changes that are going to happen there. So it probably is a limit to how much more can be done to make that acceptable. So I'm in favor.
I think this is also going to help out with Thomas Brooks Park over there because of all the traffic that goes in and out of there for that ball field. I think it is a good use of that area. I agree with Nicole about the school and the hotel, but overall I think it's a good plan.
Keep working toward me.
We didn't talk about it very much, but to me the other piece of this is folks that have put together this assemblage for this property, and there were some others that maybe had some concerns about traffic, and it seems like the applicant has made some concessions, and it also makes sense to me that you would not drive through the neighborhood, that you would go out in the roundabout. So I'm hoping that helps the other neighborhood, and then it also helps these folks that are trying to basically do something with their property that have been kind of stuck in that area for I don't know how long, but it hopefully this makes both happy.
Bring it on home.
So you look at this rezoning, and standing on its own merits, I would argue that this is definitely not enough commercial for a commercial center. However, we have a known, as Dan mentioned, and then we have another soon to be known. So looking at the entire commercial center as a whole, I would argue that I think there is adequate commercial. So being able to see the big picture, I think, has really helped me push me forward and kind of wanted to go along with this. One thing I will say that is really giving me angst is the density of the multifamily. We're talking about 400 units on 20 acres of land. That is a lot of density, especially for an area, if you look at it now, it's not very dense. There's not, I don't think, anywhere that kind of density in that area. So while I think at a major interchange, it does make sense, I am really a bit apprehensive about the kind of density that this is proposing, and I don't really see this as something that would open up the floodgates. I think this is kind of a one-time thing, not necessarily something that, from a density standpoint, that area would be okay with. So while I'm in support of this, the density does give me a little angst, and that's something I think, as this board continues to see cases in that area, we just have to keep in mind as these kind of things roll in.
And let me just build on your density a little bit in that we'd mentioned some of the folks who might live in these multifamily homes, young professionals, all. We didn't talk at all about post-retirement, which sometimes live in apartments or you know, smaller multifamilies. I don't see too many of them living in this area because we're not going to have a lot of commercial amenities for them to get to. So we're going to have young professionals who work, who are going to get on that interchange. And that's why they're going to move there, is because the interchange is right there. So I really hope traffic gets all the traffic mitigations are successful, because I think they're going to be a big issue for that high density amount in there. But I would, if you will indulge me for a moment, I want to go beyond 3 dimensions, Dan. I want to go to 4 dimensions and add the dimension of time. We have 3 entities into this commercial center. One that's already been established, one that's here, and one that's yet to come. How many times have we seen the cumulative come back to bite the last person? I could very much see the third person come in, be told, all the multifamily's been used up. You don't have that anymore. We're looking at this holistically, and holistically, you got to be all commercial. So I just want to point that out, that as the time goes, as Project 2 got the benefit of the big supermarket in Project 1, Project 3's got to deal with all the multifamily in Project 2. But that's not the time I'm thinking of, really. 5 years ago, if this would have come here, there's not a chance I'm voting for it. It would have been go back and make the commercial happen. But since we're a board of citizens, and I'm supposed to give you my personal citizens' input, anecdotally, I see a lot of 5,000, 10,000 empty storefronts. I am in no way going to tell somebody to go build commercial in a place that's not 100% can't miss the best possible chance, because right now someone building a storefront has the deck stacked against them with online and all this other stuff. You come to me and tell me that it's not conducive for that, I buy it out of hand. So I'm good to go with this. And thank you for that multi-dimensional indulgence. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add to it? Well then, would all those in favor please say aye? Aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Our motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Still don't know what a calming device is.
One of those things that I drive over too fast.
Our second is 19 REZ05, Searstone Phase 2. Hello, Ms. Grannon.
Hello, how are you this evening? For your consideration tonight is a request to amend a portion of the Searstone Planned Development District. Subject property is highlighted here in yellow. The Preston Forest neighborhood is located to the east of the site. The property is located north of the Fenton Estate subdivision and located to the west of the Whitebridge subdivision and the Cornerstone Shopping Center. The existing and proposed zoning is Planned Development District Major. The Sears Farm PDD was first approved back in 2002. It was a continuing care retirement community with a retail village. What's currently approved is 355 multifamily units, 48 duplex units or cottages, a 96-bed assisted living facility, office use, retail use, a hotel, amenities and accessory uses, all divided up into different phases, with the continuing care retirement community, phases 1 and 2, where the healthcare facility and a number of the apartments and cottages were located, along with a clubhouse, the retail village in the corner, and then an unbuilt residential multifamily phase that could be either age-restricted multifamily or non-age restricted. So truly what you've got here was the epitome of a planned development district. Mix of uses, variety of uses, uses that complemented each other. And then the Imagined Cary Community Plan was approved and designated this area for a commercial center, commercial mixed-use center. Once again, compliance with the proposed uses. What the applicant's proposing is not a change in the uses. They're not increasing the number of dwelling units. They're not changing what the proposed use would be. It would still be a continuing care retirement community, but they're looking at the way the buildings are arranged in phase 2, and they're asking to make some changes just to the phase 2 portion of the plan. So this shows you what you've got today. Just outside of phase 2, you've got phase 1, where the clubhouse is located here, and then you've got an existing residential multifamily building. So there's the clubhouse and the existing residential multifamily. Then you've got an existing healthcare building that's not been completed yet. So phase 2 would include an expansion to bring it up to the allotment of 96 beds. And then they're proposing a change to where the conservatory is located and a proposal to remove the conservatory as a zoning condition. Currently, there's a proposed road that bisects the center of the subject property. And what's being proposed today is a new alignment of the buildings. So this shows you the preliminary development plan, the color version of the preliminary development plan, that shows a new residential multifamily building that would include an auditorium, a multi-purpose room, cafe, and dining facilities. Instead of a road that bisects the subject property, the road would now terminate with an area or a motor court area that would enable pickup and drop off of residents. And there would be a new route running through the buildings, running through the property, so the road would loop the outside of the buildings. Instead of a conservatory, the applicant is proposing 3 community gathering spaces, one located here, one located to the north of the property near the clubhouse, and then a third one near the stormwater ponds. As I mentioned, the conservatory that was a zoning condition with the original planned development district is proposed to be removed. What is a conservatory, you might ask? You were just getting ready to ask that, weren't you? Well, there's no definition of the conservatory in the planned development district document other than these zoning conditions. Had to be a minimum of 20,000 square feet, maximum of 30,000 square feet, 2 stories in height, 30 feet in area. It was to be constructed as part of phase 2, and it could be set at the back of the sidewalk. All right, did that answer the question? No. There was a beautiful rendering and model of the conservatory that Mr. Sears envisioned. This was shown to residents. This was shown to neighbors. This was shown to future property owners in the Sears Stone community. Neighbors saw it. Future business owners saw it. It was gorgeous. He described it. I was at the public hearing where he described it as a regional draw, something where you could have concerts, where you could have receptions, something that would benefit not only the residents, but it would benefit the greater Cary community. Well, this was back before we had the Cary Art Center, before we had the Cary Theater that was renovated. It sounded really good, but it also sounded extremely expensive. Something like this, I can't even imagine what the price tag would be. The initial traffic study did not address anything like this with the proposal. It was an amenity feature that was not totally vetted in terms of how do you pay for it, how do you make it happen, how do you park it, because there was no parking allocation for this either. So it's not really surprising that to get phase 2 finished, the applicants wouldn't want to ask for this to be removed. But is it still a disappointment? Yes, it was. It looked beautiful, looked absolutely wonderful. So what the applicants are saying is, in lieu of this conservatory, they are proposing a new building design with this new multi-family building that's going to have these amenities in it for the residents. As I mentioned, an auditorium or multi-purpose room that would be 6,500 square feet in size, 3,300 square feet for dining facility, and then a cafe, 2,500 square feet. Community feedback on the proposed request was held at 2 different neighborhood meetings. There was a neighborhood meeting here at Town Hall on April 3rd and another one on June 13th. There was a great deal of support from the residents. There was concern voiced by 2 neighbors about the loss of the conservatory and other issues related to the village, which is not part of this rezoning. But we've heard frequently that, we thought there was going to be a Dean and DeLuca. We all know that you can't regulate who the end user is going to be, but that was part of the initial vision, you know, for this village. And the village did not materialize the way everybody thought it might. But it's a separate piece of property. We're looking at the continuing care retirement community. At the town council public hearing, we heard support voiced by the applicant, and there was one speaker, a resident, who was very concerned about the view. If this new building goes in with this resident's view at the end of the building, he was going to lose his view. So he's been in touch with Samaritan and with the applicant, so they're talking to each other. And I spoke with him today, and he said he hopes that they can continue talking, because he's not completely satisfied, but at least they're having a good conversation. And then the town council expressed concern about the removal of the conservatory. It was promised as something as a way of giving back to the community. So since the town council public hearing, 2 residents who were not able to attend came and spoke at Public Speaks Out and voiced support for the new design and provided a lengthy list of different things that Searstone does to give back to the community, whether it's providing a place for artwork in the hallways for the Cary Arts League, or opening up the ballroom for different arts groups, and then monetary giving. So there's been a lot of support for this from the neighbors. And then the applicant came back and committed to more design elements for the community gathering spaces, including an irrigation system. So as far as the community gathering spaces are concerned, they committed to the phase 1, community gathering space 1, being a minimum size of 35,000 square feet, providing walking paths or trail conversation areas, and a sports court, something where you could either play bocce ball or maybe a putting green, I heard somebody ask for today, but it would be open-ended. It would be something that would have some active recreation in it. And they've committed to some additional enhanced landscaping at the corner to help with the vista coming into the site. With community gathering space number 2, it would incorporate a stormwater measure. It would be a minimum of 15,000 square feet, would also have walking trails, benches, additional evergreen plantings on the side adjacent to Walkerstone Drive. And then community gathering space number 3 would be a minimum of 10,000 square feet. Again, sidewalks, benches, and as I mentioned, an irrigation system to be provided as a zoning condition for all landscaped areas in phase 2. Staff has conducted an analysis and found that the live, work, and shape chapters are all applicable. This is a business. It's not just a residence, but it's a place of business. There's a lot of employees here at Searstone. And as I mentioned earlier, they are not proposing any reduction to the perimeter buffers with this request. So staff's finding is that the proposed amendment is consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan and addresses the policies of the Live, Work, and Shape chapters. For your consideration is whether or not the removal of this conservatory is justified by the new community gathering spaces and the amenities that are being proposed with this new building. And this concludes staff's presentation. After the applicant's comments, I'll be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. We can hear from the applicant now.
Existing and proposed, right? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am John Cook. I represent the applicant. The applicant is Samaritan Housing Foundation. Samaritan Housing Foundation only owns phase 1 and phase 2 of this overall PDD. And the purpose of this application is to finish Searstone Retirement Community. We have our development team here, so if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Also, Mr. Roger Heiser is with us. He is the president of the Searstone Residents Association. He's available to answer any questions that you might have. Let me just say that Mrs. Grant did a great job. We agree with their analysis of the staff. We don't intend to repeat what the staff said already to you. But one thing I would like to kind of talk about, since we're talking about this conservatory, I think the question they asked you was about conservatory and community gathering space, is I wanted to come back to what the foundations are of all these policies, because as the staff said in its report, there is nothing in a single town planning document other than this PDD that says a conservatory should be located here, or any major public facility. It's not shown in the park plan at all. The reason is, as I mentioned in our public hearing, that the parking's not adequate. The roads are not built for that. So foundationally, what should we be looking at? And I think Chapter 1 tells us. Chapter 1 of the community plan appropriately is entitled Foundations. And what does it say? I'm going to quote it. The language is just, I don't know who wrote it, but it's dead on correct. Page 7, under the rubric, Demand for 21st Century Development Options. Quote, there's a demand for new 21st century development. Many polls show that retirees and young professionals both desire the same type of living environment. One that is walkable, one that is connected, affordable, and vibrant. It will be important for Cary to accommodate the housing needs of its aging and diversifying population. This application is built around those characteristics. If you look at what's approved, you have an unconnected community of retirees. Each residential building is a separate standalone building, requiring retirees to walk outside just to go and get dinner. It's separated and bisected by a major road, Searstone Drive, and it is further divided by this conservatory, which apparently is to serve everybody in the whole region, but it separates the community. If you look at the proposed design, it connects the community together, eliminates the bisecting road, eliminates the dividing conservatory, and connects the buildings so that all the new residents in Searstone will have the option to walk inside or outside to dinner and to any recreational or social events in the community, which is the second standard I read about, walkable. It's a much more walkable community now, a much safer community to walk in. And the 3 community gathering spaces also each have a walking path or a sidewalk. So they're walkable too. Affordable is one of the standards, and I'm going to talk to that last, but that's an important one. Vibrancy. We're blessed. We have a very vibrant community of retirees. We want to be more vibrant, and we know what they feel are the needs of that community. That's the beauty. We know what they feel they need. And they need a new auditorium that's much larger than any meeting space they have. That's what's proposed. They want another dining area than what they have. That's what's proposed. They want a cafe kind of style dining opportunity. That's what's proposed. The other vibrant aspect of this is a much more open recreational opportunity than what exists now. If you look at the 3 community gathering spaces, they each have different qualities. From the largest one that's going to have a community garden, it's going to have a conversation area, it's going to have a sports court, increased dense landscaping, to the more kind of courtyard experience in a different spot. All of these provide more vibrancy than what we have today in our community. And then finally, accommodation. I know you know this plan better than I'll never know the plan. But the one thing that's clear in the plan is, and the town council said it after the public hearing, this is their word, it's a dire are desperate need for this kind of senior housing in Cary today. Which leads me to the last point, and the last point being the standard of affordable. It is true that no retirement community can afford to build a public facility for the general public. But it's not just the cost. People pay for what is important to them. What people want to pay for are the amenities that are shown in this plan, because that is what's good for their community. And when you look at the 5 things that you said is the design option, the new design option for 2000 and for the 21st century, that's what they wanted. They wanted a walkable community. They wanted a connected community. They wanted an affordable community. And they wanted a vibrant community. We wouldn't have filed this application if you hadn't adopted the community plan. Because the community plan is adopted 2017, which constitutes the best and most recent articulation of your policy, planning policies in the town. So we ask for you to recommend approval of our application. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I open this up to questions of the staff and applicant, I'll save us a little time and I'll ask you the one question that I'm sure everybody on this board wants to ask. If you take away the conservatory, where is Colonel Mustard going to hide the candlestick?
Mr. Chairman, I have no answer to that question.
Let's start on this side with our question.
That was good. How many residents are in Searstone right now? Approximate. 250. Great.
250.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it. Nicole?
Yep. For me, it's an easy answer. I think that the proposed plan is well thought out, and I've been to Searstone before. I have aging parents and in-laws, and I think that this is, in my opinion, a much more appropriate use of the space. Having a building in which a lot of people are coming into the community to utilize, and if it's a concert, you know, it's very loud, there's a lot of people, you know, I think that what's being proposed is much more appropriate.
I pretty much agree. It's obviously going, just as you pointed out, from kind of a blocks set aside individually to something that's much more integrated with the open space as well as what they apparently need or wish for in terms of the spaces or the buildings that can be utilized more effectively. So it makes perfect sense.
Any questions, Joe?
No questions.
None from me.
No questions.
How about you guys? Okay.
I don't have any questions.
I don't
They've been
either.
answered.
All righty.
Now that I know where Mr. Mustard is going to hide.
I was really scared.
Thank you.
The only one who knew that reference.
Oh no.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go right ahead.
I move that the board find case number REZ05 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
Just real quick, the conservatory, you know, as it was said earlier, it's a beautiful, awesome concept, but it's really not. I don't find it to be really practical. And to me, one of the things about Searstone's always kind of surprised me is the lack of green, and I think this really will go a long way to address that. It's kind of stark over there now, and so I think these green areas are needed. I also like the idea that folks can stay indoors. You know, as it was said, you know, going outdoors, that's got to be tough. My only concern, and I'm glad it was addressed, it was in the report, is I hope they can take care of the residents' obstructive view. I mean, that's unfortunate, and I hope they do work that out. But it's not enough that I would not want to support this.
So for me, I look at it from two different lenses. The first one, as a citizen of Cary, what do I think is best for the community? And personally, I would go with the gathering space. I think that is of more value than what's currently proposed. I also look at it from the lens of the residents. What is best in their interest? And I think that this new proposal, additional dining and auditorium, I definitely think those are in their best interest. So for me, it's kind of a win-win, and definitely supportive of it.
Any other comments on this side?
I have one, it's actually a question. I should have asked it before at this point, but it's for staff. In the summary and the request, in the section that's plan details, are those conditions or are those just proposed?
Yes.
So
yes.
so what I'm seeing there in terms of square footage of minimums and
correct.
Things,
those are zoning conditions.
Those are zoning conditions. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I support it. I had to go through the angst because I remember what used to be there before. So it was part of that romanticism, altruism of having been in the community for over 30 years. I remember the debates over just even Searstone itself and the Sears farm. And I don't want to be disparaging, but there was a lot of promises, and there was kind of a field of dreams perspective. And the conservatory, which was a piece that was put on there it was meant to be a public facility and open to the public, and all the limitations the staff brought up. So now it's kind of coming back around, and maybe it's the ability to be the Monday, hindsight's always 20/20, to look at what would have made more sense versus the individual apartment units, which may in the connectivity. And we see where CCRCs have evolved to, and the market has evolved to understand what is it the market wants. I mean, the anecdote is I have the folks who developed the multifamily across the street, used to be a client of mine. There are people who looked at Searstone, they moved over there because that was the amenity they liked, of a Class A plus, almost hotel type living, etc. But I asked about the conditions because, like others, I mean, I think for a lot of folks, the overall development is less than I think what a lot of people hope for, and that it really does need some green. It needs some trees around both the existing retention pond, etc. Not telling you anything you don't already know. Can't tell you to do that. I am sensitive to those folks who are in the existing building and all of a sudden they're lost their view, and you'll be dealing those are your customers, and you'll have, I'm sure you'll address those as appropriate. But that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Any more on this side of the room?
Just briefly, I kind of view this, like was said earlier, about through the lens of the customers that are there now. 250 people. My mother lives in a similar community, and I can tell you that if they weren't happy with something, you'd have all 250 lined up saying the fact that so few people have made any comments, it's obvious that's what they want. So to me, it's a no-brainer to go through with it.
Anything else?
I've made my comments earlier.
And had similar reaction to Dan's about what was promised originally and what's being changed at this point. And I went through all of that. I don't think it's a bait and switch situation. I think it was a good idea at the time situation, and the practicalities have changed, and it makes this very appropriate. So I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, and to me what makes this thing not a bait and switch is they're asking. It was a bait and switch, they just go ahead and do it. But that's what the system's for. This case puts the in rezoning. It's you had a plan, and now times have changed, and you come and go through the process and say we'd like to change it, and you make your case and let the chips fall where they may. So it's if there's a multitude of folks opposed to it, they'll be heard. If there's a multitude in support, they'll be heard. And away we go. Any comments? Then let's see how it goes. Would all those in favor please say aye and raise their hand? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed at all? Say no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Our final case of the night is before us, and it is 19 REZ 13 White Oak Church.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. The White Oak Baptist Church is asked to amend zoning conditions associated with the site of their existing resource building located at 1621 White Oak Church Road. The subject property is located about 300 feet south of Ridgeback Road. White Oak Elementary School is adjacent to the north and west, and the White Oak Baptist Church is located across the street to the east. The subject property is currently zoned ONICU. Conditions associated with that zoning limit uses to assembly and religious assembly. The applicant has asked to add office as a permitted use with the condition that it would be limited to a maximum of 5,000 square feet in the existing building. The White Oak Foundation has been providing community outreach in a variety of ways for over 20 years, and this request would further help the church in their mission to provide limited medical and dental care services to the community in an appropriate and professional location. In our analysis, staff finds that the policies of the work and shape chapters of the Imagine Cary Community Plan are applicable. In regards to shape policies, it's worth noting that the existing building was constructed under Cary's Community Appearance Manual and LDO regulations for buffers, architecture, and other site design standards. This minor addition of office use will maintain the appropriate transition to adjacent uses, while providing an opportunity for limited office uses outside of a designated commercial center. To help illustrate the transitions, this map shows the property in relation to the existing school and church, as well as future uses recently approved for the adjacent properties as part of the White Oak Plan Development District. A neighborhood meeting was held in July, and 2 nearby property owners attended. There were some concerns voiced about traffic as this area has developed. One email has also been received from a citizen who felt low-density residential uses were more appropriate in the area. A public hearing took place at the August Town Council meeting, and no citizens spoke at that hearing. Staff finds that the proposal is consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan as it supports policies in the work and shape chapters, provides a small non-residential use in the neighborhoods west of Flat Branch in the Green Level Special Planning Area, and helps provide transitions between the more intense school use to the north and west and existing and proposed residential uses continuing south along White Oak Church Road. In reviewing this request, the board may consider whether the use is appropriate at this location and whether it provides suitable transitions between neighboring uses or any other issues necessary to determine whether the proposal is consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. This concludes staff's presentation, and following the applicant's comments will be available for any questions.
Thank you. We'll hear from the applicant now.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to stand and speak. We thank staff for their presentation. It was well done. We couldn't have done it any better. We just ask for your support in this rezoning, that we might continue to be of service to the community and also offer this service in a much more professional way. We thank you for considering it, and we just ask for your support that we can continue to do what we do, and that's serve the community.
Thank you. Can we just get your name for the record, too?
Oh, I'm sorry, Alonzo Wilson.
Thanks so much. And if you don't mind, we'll just stay right there, and we'll see if we have any questions for you. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Wilson or for the staff?
Hi. What's going on in the resource building now?
Right now, we are upfitting it, which will house the foundation itself. Right now, the foundation operates out of space in the church, so we wanted to increase the spaces for the foundation, and it also increases the spaces for us to do our outreach ministries, which is serving the community. One floor will house that, and the floor where we're asking for the request on now will help increase, or will not increase, but will help us provide the services that we're asking as far as dental and on a more professional level, which we currently do little right now out of the church.
Okay, so in this capacity, would this be like a clinic, or just who would this be open for? Is it a community-wide offering, or?
It's a community-wide offering. that we would provide for the community.
And I'd just like to state that the use is office, and it could be professional or medical, and that really doesn't matter who it's provided for or to. It could be community-wide or it could be private, but the condition is just for the office use.
Mm-hmm. I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So we're asking for 5,000 square feet of the existing building for office. Could be nonprofit, for-profit use. It doesn't matter. And there's also a request for a piece of the parcel of basically 1.76 acres. Can you help me explain what?
This building is located currently.
Yes.
So is that representing? So is that land outside the building that's asking for? So help me understand. I understand the square footage. That's real clear, but
Yeah, let me pull up a better map. Sorry.
Or is this like a prorating of the 5,000 square foot of the 14,000?
So the little under 2 acres is only affecting the site that's outlined in yellow, but that's actually a piece of the larger parcel that includes, a portion of the parcel was included in the recent PDD that was rezoned.
Mm-hmm.
It actually includes the piece that the existing church sits on across the road, as well as the portion to the south that includes what you see on there for future townhomes and future daycare. That's all part of the 14 plus or minus acre parcel. The 1.76 acres is what's outlined in yellow. The resource building is existing and is a little bit over 12,000 square feet. And then the 5,000 would be, up to 5,000 would be permitted for office on that 2 acre site.
Okay. Now I understand. Thank you. Okay. I have to ask a question. It's not part of the zoning here, but it's regarding community development block grant. Does anybody ask HUD what they were, because it was funded in part by CDBG funds, correct?
Correct.
And there was an application within CDBG guidelines, have some familiarity with that, as to whether anybody has talked to HUD about potential being used for commercial use. Would have been an amendment. You would have had to, just curious. I mean, I'm just curious.
That's a good question.
We have other folks from the town, Dana Widmar, who's looking at housing issues, and she has been looking at this, and at this time we're satisfied.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any other questions right now.
Thanks. Steve?
My questions have been asked and answered.
So question for staff. You mentioned the existing building is larger than 5,000 square feet, correct?
Correct. It's a little over 12.
Is there any reason that the applicant is only requesting 5,000 square feet, aka a partial building, to be rezoned to this as opposed to the entirety?
That might actually best be answered by the applicant. Could you describe what else would be taking place in that building?
At the time we did the building, which is 12,000 square foot building, we weren't 100% sure when the PDD zoning was done, of the use of the building. But at this time, we're only asking 5,000 square feet. The building is a full basement, first and second floor. The nonprofit, which is the White Oak Foundation, will house its offices in the second floor. And we wanted to ask that the first floor be used for the medical assembly use.
That definitely makes sense. Does staff have any concerns regarding compliance with this? I mean, how do you ensure that an applicant is only using 5,000 square feet of a larger building?
We actually stopped the fit-up permit in its tracks when it came in, so that's how we knew. And we put it on hold and said, sorry, you can't have your fit-up permit until you get your zoning approved. So Mr. Wilson has been waiting patiently with a contractor on hold, on standby, to move forward until he gets the appropriate zoning in place. So we do monitor it, and then of course our fire department does inspections on a routine basis. So that's how we find out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, that's all I got.
I have no questions.
No questions.
Mary Jo?
Nope, I have none.
I have one question. The justification statement, there's a paragraph in here that talks about by zoning condition no more than 4,086 square feet can be used for medical and or professional.
The applicant, that's all they needed. We asked them to round it up just to be clear.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they've provided us with an updated affidavit for that, to speak to that, just to simplify it a little bit. In case they inadvertently forgot to count a bathroom or something, just keep it simple.
Okay.
Easy number to remember and enforce, easier to enforce.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just like, oh, is that then 1,000 more that needs to be? Okay. Okay, that was it.
No questions.
Okay. No other questions for the staff or the applicant? Anyone? All right, how about a motion then?
I'll move that the board find case number, is it REZ, 19 REZ 13 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? No?
I think the case has been made for why they need the rezoning very clearly and are anxious to move forward with the renovation.
Any other discussion at all? All right, would all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no? Another unanimous motion, and it is carried. Thank you very much for sitting there and bearing with us.
Thank you.
We're now on to Act 11, amendments to our land development ordinance.
Boy.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Board. First, I want to say thank you for your service to the town, especially to our council, especially you, Chairman. I think you're in your, maybe one more meeting with us, and you're going to be missed.
This is my penultimate meeting.
So, just wanted to say that because I'm not usually up here. So I see a theme tonight. It seems that with each case, this gets a little easier and easier. So I'm going to make you a promise that I guarantee this is probably the easiest case you'll see all night. These changes before you tonight are for the land development ordinance and code amendments to move our quasi-judicial decisions to our zoning board of adjustments. This is something that the town council asked us to do at their May 9th quarterly meeting. I'm glad they did. This aligns very well with our experts. This approach for transferring QJ decisions to the Zoning Board of Adjustments was recommended by the UNC School of Government, as you can see on the slide with David Owens and Adam Lovelady. David Owens actually has come before the town and spoken on this before. This change would allow council to focus on legislative actions that are more broadly acceptable to our citizens. Today, there are roughly 100 overall types of QJ decisions in the town codes and ordinances. With these changes, we are proposing to move all but 2 actions to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. What would move is highlighted in yellow on your screen, and town council would remain the approval authority only when required by MXD zoning conditions, you could think Fenton, or for vested rights decisions, which are actually required to go to council by state law. If you're not familiar with the Zoning Board of Adjustments, much like you, they meet here monthly, and they currently handle all variances and most appeals today, as well as a few special uses. So, the proposed amendment would simply shift the responsibility for making these decisions from our town council to our Zoning Board of Adjustments, as council requested, with no changes to the approval criteria at this time. Staff met with the Zoning Board of Adjustments to go over this change with them at their June 3rd meeting and again on August the 5th. If these amendments are approved by the council, the Zoning Board of Adjustment would begin hearing the larger suite of quasi-judicial cases beginning on their new year, which would be around October or November. So, when at the public hearing at council, there was no citizen spoke, and we haven't made any changes since that time. And the recommendation is that we find this consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan. You know, this is technically you're seeing this because this is a revising the LDO, so it has to come before you, but it's not really a technical change. It's more of a procedural change, shifting from the council to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So thank you for your consideration, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Have we any questions for the staff concerning this? If not,
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun, didn't I?
I'd really like to know what abrogation of vested rights means.
So that's in the staff report, and that was a legal term to which I said it's just required by state law.
Terminating or affecting.
I'll bet it's the kind of thing you do in a conservatory.
I changed their language.
So yeah, and I kind of let it slide. The vested rights decision itself to grant someone a longer term right to develop than would normally be allowed actually doesn't have to be made by council, and so we are shifting that decision away from them. But if anyone has ever granted a vested right and then council, and there are some statutory reasons why you could then take it away and say, we're not going to let you build that development without meeting some of our newer standards in our LDO. If you're ever going to pull that vested right away, that's the abrogation of the vested right, and council would have to vote and decide on that. That's not a decision we could move to a different board.
Due to state law?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
So glad Lisa was here.
I waited the whole meeting to figure out what the answer was.
Do we have any other questions?
I do. I just want to understand, is this a requirement by, or a recommendation from like the state, or is it a choice that the council?
So state law requires that the procedure by which, when you have a quasi-judicial decision, how it's handled. In other words, being done by the council or a board. This is really more of an issue of what our ordinance requires the conditions which, and I didn't see. If you went back, I can show it to you on the yellow slide. Our rules kind of dictate when you go to this process. So if we have a 100,000 square foot building or larger that hasn't been rezoned in I think 2 years, if we have 100 or more residential units, and if there's a drive-through, so we kind of created the conditions by which then you follow the state law and send these right now to council. And council, specifically as setting policy, decided that was the criteria by which they wanted to see these cases. They could have made those criteria just about anything they wanted. Okay. I mean, the law's that flexible. But once you decide to go QJ, you have to follow the procedures outlined in the law. It's a little complicated. Thank you for being on the P&Z board instead of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. How about that?
Well, since we're all asking questions after I had jumped the gun.
Yeah, feel free.
I'll jump my own gun. Oh, does anyone who has a case adjudicated by the Zoning Board of Adjustment that would be quasi-judicial have the ability to go before council if they don't like the outcome?
No.
They have a choice if you're in the process currently. They won't have a choice. So think of anybody that's currently in process. I think we have some, how many? 70 some cases in process now. I'm not saying all of those would go QJ, but anything in process now, they technically have the choice to choose which path they want to go. Anything that comes in after this code is changed, we'll go by the code at the time the application's in.
Okay, so that authority is delegated in.
And it goes to Superior Court, is that correct?
So anybody who doesn't, even today when council makes a decision, if you don't agree with the quasi-judicial decision, your next step is to go to court.
Yes. Oh, okay.
So council will not be any part of the process after this.
I see.
Oh.
To piggyback on Mark's question, does staff have any concerns with the ability to make these decisions being removed from an elected body and being placed in an appointed body?
Well, I'm going to say, so we've been doing this for 7 years now. It's kind of been, there's been an ebb and flow as that's occurred. We've changed some of the rules as we've gone. Used to council would have to see the entire case or make an approval, I believe. Now they can just see modifications. So we see the exact same thing kind of continuing as it goes to Zoning Board of Adjustment. We told the council that we'd be evaluating this. We'd be evaluating, well, we constantly evaluate everything, but we'll evaluate the criteria by which it goes to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I didn't say this, but a nuance is that if you're hearing a case, and as the council right now, they cannot speak to applicants, so they have to kind of remain neutral. They can't talk to anybody, unbiased, and they can only hear the case as it comes to them the night that it's presented. So one thing, so that means kind of as an oddity, council can't talk to their constituency throughout the process. As you know, Zoning Board of Adjustment is a board to the council. They're not elected by citizens. So you see how it can kind of create this conflict with the elected board, with our council. And I think they're interested in trying it a different way. And much like everything else, we'll evaluate it and see.
What's interesting, this predates Lisa, but I believe back in the 1980s, I used to be liaison to the Board of Adjustment. This is the way it used to be. And it was changed later with the council taking over those responsibilities, and now it's going back to the way that it was many years ago. So
if you're around here long enough,
yeah,
full circle. Full circle.
Anything else?
Great questions, by the way.
I completely forgot if there was a motion out there. Oh, yes, there was. Was there not?
No, there's
no, there wasn't.
Yet.
Okay, so
I'll make a motion.
Save me, somebody.
Yeah, let's get through with the clue game. I move that the board find LDO Amendment Act 11 amendments of the two. I guess it's Act 11 amendments to the LDO in Town Code is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Oh, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Like I said, I think this is going back to the way it was many years ago in the 80s, so I think it should work very well.
Back to the future.
Any other comments on this before we vote? With all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then that motion also carries unanimously. I have a feeling the next one will be unanimous and we will be 5 for 5. Anyone care to make the next motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I was right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.